in the South Asian families, it's kind of encouraged once you graduate, you find a job.
Anyone who has ever been successful, made a lot of money, it's because they built something of their own.
Every startup founder has this hustle of finding the first 100 users.
Early startup founder mistake is focusing on just growth in the beginning and not really thinking about retention. If you try to cater to everyone all the time, then you end up catering to no one.
Instead of being paralyzed by this fear that, oh, something is gonna happen, anticipate the obstacles, prepare for the worst case scenario. Don't really wait for perfect conditions. So our today's guest is an entrepreneur since he was 8, selling origami for lunch money. Since then, he launched creative ventures across fashion, tech, media, and community building. From a calligraphy-inspired clothing brand to Ummahfy, a platform connecting Muslims through events, and most recently, Noor House, a community space for Muslim creatives to come together. He's a designer, a developer, and a visionary who transforms ideas into impact. Please welcome the inspiring Safi Qadir to the Ramsha podcast. Well, pleasure to have you and really excited.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you have been an entrepreneur since the age of 8, starting with selling origami for lunch money. Now that's amazing. How did that early experience shape your mindset?
Yeah. I mean, the origami thing, I think it was just an early passion. And I think that's sort of how entrepreneurship has always been for me. I don't exactly know when in my mind that I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I remember telling my parents at a very young age I never wanted to work a job in my entire life. And that's because I knew that anyone who has ever been successful or made a lot of money or had large impact in the world, it's because they built something of their own, not like joined something else, right? So I realized that at a very young age. But I don't think it's just because of that side of the equation. Because when I was even younger, I wasn't really thinking about impact or making tons of money. For me, I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents both work, other professionals, and even my grandparents weren't entrepreneurs either. But both of my parents' sisters are painters and artists, and I have that gene within me. I've been doing calligraphy also since I was like 8 to 10 years old. And I think to me, entrepreneurship is just another form of art. The same way, as I do calligraphy, I'm writing things, turning a blank piece of paper into a piece of artwork with which could be valued quite a bit. So I think that's one element of entrepreneurship for me is like the fact that I can take a 1 cent piece of paper and take a $5 pen and create a painting that could be $10 or $10,000 if I get good enough. But at the same time, entrepreneurship itself is taking a blank canvas, an idea, and creating a concept for a business or taking something that hasn't been done before, tweaking it, making it 10x better, and creating value from nothing. So, in that sense, entrepreneurship is just a very creative endeavor. And as a creative, it's always been something that I've been interested in.
Wow, that's inspiring. And you just mentioned that you told your parents that you would never do a 9 to 5. So usually in the South Asian families, it's kind of encouraged that once you graduate, you find a job, you have stable income coming. So how did they react when you told them that you're not gonna do this?
Yeah. So I told them that in high school. I think that was after I made my first bit of internet money in my life, which was, you know, past the origami phase in elementary, middle school. I bought my first camera and I started doing freelance photography and videography. And I somehow landed a gig working with Verizon doing some promotional thing for like, it was probably like the iPhone 10 or 11 launch. Probably for like the iPhone 10 or 11 launch. And I made a couple $100 and I was like, wow, like I'm never going to work a job. Money's abundant. The internet is the future. Like I'm good. Obviously, that didn't end up being the case. When I went to Purdue, I had a couple internships, and I think those were very formative experiences. One, in the sense that they gave me the confidence, especially after working at Adobe. I felt confident that I could build something because I had honed my engineering skills outside of the classroom. But it also gave me the confidence and the understanding within myself, like I was right in middle school. I do not enjoy working a traditional 9 to 5 within a corporate setting. So after I ended up working at Adobe during my senior year, I actually turned down my return offer, which was like a high six-figure return offer, and decided to build a health tech startup, which immediately failed within like the first year. It was 2022, which was like one of the worst years in the past 10 for raising venture capital, and VCs were not taking a bet onto like Purdue new grads. Um, but that was a really formative experience. My first realm, like actually building, my first foray into actually building a tech startup. And from there, I ended up working at a startup incubator, which was finally at long last working within a startup, which I had wanted to do, but Purdue just didn't have a lot of resources and community around the startup ecosystem. And I realized that, okay, I can work within startups, within places where it's a very entrepreneurial, you're building things from 0 to 1, but at the end of the day it just wasn't a fit. The leadership where I was at, they weren't technologists, they were just business people who wanted to work in the technology space, and they didn't really understand how tech products were built. They were taking a very outdated mindset with regards to building those sort of things. So they ended up cutting the team I was working on, and I said, you know what, I've worked in big tech, I've worked at startups, now I'm going to do my own thing. So I started thinking about what I wanted to do next. I went into like a 6 month or so sprint thinking about a bunch of different business ideas, kind of incubating things, doing user research. And then I came up with the idea for Ummahfy, and I've been building that ever since.
And I would say that's really impressive. It's a platform that we really need. The way I look at it is the Muslim community is really diverse, right? It's really talented people out there. But we see a lot of students struggling to find opportunities, young professionals feeling that loneliness and wanting to really collaborate with other like minded people, and even like organizers, reaching the right people. So, what were some of the gaps that you noticed that led you to build Ummahfy?
Yeah. I think one of the first things that I said is, so I started building Ummahfy right after or soon after I graduated college, within a year, right? And the thing you realize is once you graduate college, there is no Muslim Student Association, right? There's no easy way to find and meet other like-minded Muslims near you. So the story of how that came about was, I was in this sprint trying to figure out what I wanted to build, and at my masjid, they announced, which is how you normally found events, that Haji Noordin, a famous Islamic calligraphy artist, was coming and doing a class at the Makkah Center. And I immediately was like, okay, amazing. I want to sign up. But by the time I got to talk to them, the event was already sold out. And I was so heartbroken by that because I've been doing calligraphy for 10, 15 years, and Haji Noor has always been an inspiration to me. And the fact that I had missed out on this event because I wasn't, you know, in the loop, or I didn't check the Instagram or the WhatsApp fast enough, that really bothered me because Muslim events and connecting with your community, it shouldn't be up to like Mark Zuckerberg, right? It should be up to us. So that's when I came up with the idea for Ummahfy and really called my best friend and co-founder, actually the same co-founder I was building my origami paper products company with in elementary school, is my same co-founder right now. I called him up, and I said, hey, like I have this idea. Let's just start building it. Like I know people need this. We honestly didn't do a whole lot of like idea validation. I talked to like 5 people near me in the Muslim scene, and they're like, yes, absolutely. And at the end of the day, a lot of great products are built out of solving the founder's own problem and their own need, and understanding that, hey, if this is a burning problem in my heart, then it's going to be a burning problem in other people's hearts too. And that's really why I was like, okay, we're building this. And, here we are.
That's awesome. What a lot of people do is they take too much time overthinking
Yeah.
and just getting stuck on that ideation phase. So it's really tough to just execute it. And you did that, which is amazing. Every startup founder has this hustle of finding the first 100 users, which that's the toughest. Like, how do you find the right people who would benefit from your product or your service? So what did the early growth look like for you, and how did you get the first 100 users?
Yeah. I think the first 100 were a lot easier for us, and I'll explain that. But I think the first 1,000 was definitely the big struggle. And the reason why the first 100 wasn't too bad is because we built Ummahfy from the ground up as like an internet company, as a social media first company. So the month leading up to launching Ummahfy, I started posting nearly every day on Instagram and TikTok, T minus 30 days, T minus 29 days. My early fans will remember that. And, we probably gained at least, 10,000 plus views from that. And we were plugging every day, hey, we have a waiting list, we have an email list, sign up, link in bio, and you'll be informed as soon as we launch. So by the time we launched Ummahfy, I'd like to say we had over 200 people on the waiting list. So when we launched, we immediately converted those people into users. We had our first 100 users like that. And when we posted our launch video as well, we promoted it. We told everyone else we knew to promote it. We got like 15,000 views within the first 24 hours. So we spiked at least to 500 users. From there, that's when like the longer growth game began. And for us, what that looked like was really a flywheel between content and events. So we hosted our first event. Actually, our first event was an absolute flop. It was in Berkeley during Muslim Tech Fest. And what we didn't realize is that there was another event going on. Well, we knew that was going on, but we didn't realize that it would go over as all Desi Muslim things end up going. So the concept was there's this great event and people were going to come afterwards to our event. And we had tons of signups. And then that event got delayed an hour and it got delayed like an hour and a half. So we had like maybe 10, 15 people, which, we were expecting over 50. So I was bummed. But at the end of the day, like I am still close friends with Ali from MTC and a lot of the other people who came to that event just because those were like the OG supporters. But that event aside, came back to Chicago, hosted our first event at Oud Cafe, which was amazing. Sold out. It was actually like overflowing, and really taking the audience from events and then making sure we're capturing those events well with content. That's really been like one of our main flywheels for growth. So we'll get a bunch of users from the events that we host, or we'll partner with event organizers. They'll host their own events, or we'll host collab events. So it's really that event ecosystem, and then making sure that from that event ecosystem, there's content being produced during those events and using that to get more users interested in Ummahfy. So that's how we've grown from 500 to 10,000, and how I expect we'll grow even further is really just doubling down on that because I know it works, and adding more inputs into that equation.
Wow, no, that's really impressive. But how do you retain the users, right? Like someone comes to the event and they really enjoy it, they vibe with the people there, but how do you actually make sure that they keep coming?
Right. So retention is something we've been really focused on now. I think early on, I think this is probably an early startup founder mistake, is focusing on just growth in the beginning and not really thinking about retention. And then you realize that you have a leaky bucket and you have to do something about it. So that's why we started building Ummahfy Text, which is a platform where you sign up and you'll receive text message notifications of Muslim events based on your interests, because that will make sure that people are retained within the ecosystem. When they go to events, they're now suggested new events that they might be interested in the future. And we'll also be able to retarget people who say sign up for an event through one of our partners, or an event they find on Ummahfy but they didn't sign up for Ummahfy Text. We'll notify them, be like, hey, you really enjoyed the Oud Cafe social, you should sign up for Ummahfy Text, we'll send you more events like that. So that's been one way we've been focusing on retention. And then from a more tactical like event point of view, for any event hosts out there, I'd say creating like recurring series is a great way to like foster that real community. At first we were hosting a lot of like ad hoc events, networking event here, social there, comedy show here. But we realized when you have like rituals, like humans are creatures of habit, right? They want to have rituals. So hosting like a weekly chess club, even if it's small, even if it's 5 people every week, those people are die hard, right? Now we have at Noor House, which is what our new, well, not Ummahfy's space, but a space that I'm involved with in the city for Muslim creatives and founders, hosting our weekly Thursday office hours. That's built a very strong community. Even if it's also just 10, 15 people, those people are very retentive. So sort of creating rituals, and our goal right now with Ummahfy, with regards to events, is sort of creating these event brands, going away from one-off events and creating things that are consistent where people feel like they're part of a community.
No, that's amazing. So, from my understanding, right, you're not just building a tech product. You're building a belonging for people to be seen, to be heard. And even within the Muslim community, we see people have different beliefs. They have different opinions of how they perceive certain ideas and certain things. So, how do you manage to keep everyone together? Like, even Muslims who have different belief systems, how do you make sure that they're seen, they're heard, and they actually belong there?
I think one thing I learned really early on is that if you try to cater to everyone all the time, then you end up catering to no one, right? So if you want people to feel seen and heard at your events, you want to cater the events specifically to who they are, right? And that could be something that surpasses, I don't want to say the minor things, right? But for example, if we're hosting a very specific event, like a Muslim tech networking event for founders, it doesn't matter if you're a super religious founder who, you know, does the hajj every day, or if you're a Muslim founder that's working on your deen. You're coming together with a shared purpose, a shared principle, and those people are going to feel heard despite their differences. So that's why we try to make our events very intentional, very meaningful with regards to who we're bringing together and why we're bringing them together.
No, that's amazing. So you uh target events to certain people. Like, if it's a tech focused event, then that's mostly for people who are interested in tech and making a career in that. There is a concept that I recently came across, Murphy's Law. It states that anything that can go wrong will go wrong regardless. And what's really interesting, and this is a trend that I notice, is how a lot of founders, right? A lot of entrepreneurs see it in a way that instead of being paralyzed by this fear that, oh, something is going to happen or something will go wrong, they anticipate the obstacles and they prepare for the worst case scenario, which I find really interesting. And they just keep moving forward. So they don't really wait for the perfect conditions. They just do the thing regardless, which is really interesting. So they take more ownership. Would you say that this kind of mindset has played a major role in your journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with regards to, unexpected failures, Murphy's Law, for me, I'm a bit of a stoic when it comes to building my business or life in general. So I really never worry about things that are outside of my control, right? If the website crashes, if we get hacked, if our EC2 instance gets messed up, which all of these things have happened, I'm like, okay, it's done. What's over is over. How can we fix this, right? And I think having a strong network of people to rely on and building out that network and community through events, through content, and through just rigorous outreach and meeting new people, that's given me a bit of like comfortability knowing, hey, me and my team, we're pretty fresh out of college, but we know we have a team of experts backing us if anything does go wrong. So I think that's how I hedge that uncertainty, is by knowing that I have people, behind me that are supporting me.
No, that's really interesting. I like how you mentioned that you have a team of experts. So if something goes wrong, that's within the scope of their work. But how do you hire people? Like, how do you find the right people to be part of your team? Because that can be a very big challenge.
Right. So most of these experts and advisors are not people who are hired formally, just clarifying that. But in terms of hiring, I mean, I think talent is one of the most important things for any company, right? It's the lifeblood, right? An engineer can be 100x better than another engineer, and you're not going to be paying them 100x. Unlikely. You're probably paying them 2, 3, 4, maybe 10x, right? But even still, probably like 5x. So finding and hiring talent is of the utmost important when you're building a company. And honestly, most of our interest in working for Ummahfy has been inbound. And I think that's the beautiful thing about building in public and building on social media, is you get a lot of inbound attention. The hardest part then is actually qualifying and vetting those people. And I think there is a level of inherent vetting that comes with someone who has the actual gumption to cold message a startup founder and say, hey, I want to work for you. What can I do? But there's nuances within that as well, right? Are they just saying, hey, I love what you're doing. Can we work together? I'm like, cool. What do you want to do? And they don't know. That's versus saying, hey, what do you want to do? And they take the time to actually research, this is Ummahfy, this is how we think we can improve. And for one example, a very talented young designer reached out to us, and he said, hey, like, I have feedback, I have criticism of your website. And I was even a bit uncomfortable. I was like, hey, I kind of like that part of my website. But, I thought about it and I was like, you know what? He's right. Like, I will take his opinion over mine, because at least it's new ideas coming in. Like, whether or not we actually implement that, which I think we are, to be fair, is different. But actually having an opinion and taking a stance, and at least showing that you took the time to look into what I'm doing and have some sort of opinion on it, is very important. But we've also messaged certain people in places, or people we know, we've asked if they wanted to be involved with Ummahfy, but it's really part of like building out your networks. And I'm probably going to go back to this so much: the content, the community, the event hosting, really just casting a wide net of people and being known to a lot of people. That's how you're going to increase your surface area for opportunity, whether that's finding new employees, investors, etc.
No, that's amazing. So it's the matter of just making good content, doing events, and really making people feel that they belong. You mentioned that's a designer messaged you with constructive criticism, and a lot of people um are not keen on listening to constructive criticism because it feels bad, right? You spend so much time making this website and creating this platform, and then someone comes and they're like, yeah, it's good, but it can be better. And this is not, these are the things that we don't really like. Um, Initially, was it tough for you to hear that criticism? And how did you deal with that?
Yeah. I mean, if you're a startup founder and you can't take constructive criticism, you're not going to make it. Um, of course, there is like an initial sting that happens, but I think from being a designer early on myself, and this isn't about him being a designer, it's about, as a designer, you learn to take feedback. Design teachers, design mentors, and as you're learning design in the early stages, and calligraphy, art in general, people are harsh. Actually, I'd say less art, but uh, but yeah, when you're designing, you know, people are harsh. They're gonna tear your work apart, and that really gave me that thick skin to be able to take criticism and advice. And part of that stoicism as well, right? Like, not taking your work too seriously, and understanding that everything is sort of a living and evolving thing, and that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you like your product. It's about what everyone else thinks, right? So that's very important, like, perspective to keep in mind.
Interesting. No, I completely agree. And you just mentioned that it's important to not take your work too seriously. But for someone like you who is making great content, Ummahfy, Nur House, and doing all of these great things, how do you make sure that after a point of time you're separating yourself from the work that you're doing? Like, how do you maintain that balance? Yeah.
That's been a really difficult one. Actually, I began to learn this a little bit more after I went to San Francisco during my last trip, and I attended the Founders Inc. offsite. And Furkan and Farza, the founder of F Inc. and Build Space, they were talking about Farza's journey building Build Space as a solo founder, and how he really felt like he was Build Space. And when Build Space was going well, it was like he was on top of the world, everything was going great. But when he no longer felt aligned with what he was doing, it kind of felt like everything was falling apart, because it's like everyone, the entire world is like, oh my God, like, this is Build Space, like, this is Farza. And if Farza didn't feel right building it anymore, then there's just a really strong disconnect. And like, people have jokingly called me Mr. Ummahfy, because I just talk about it so much. I put myself all the time, like, it's a strong part of my identity. And I think Furkan was the one who was really, he had a great approach to this, where he really separates himself from the things that he's working on, right? Like, he is his own person, and his businesses are a separate entity. And I think that probably just came with time and experience. Maybe he was like that when he was building his initial companies, but just looking at him and realizing, like, wow, he is building things at the utmost scale. I think he's like this incredible ecosystem, and yet he's able to separate himself from the outcome, separate himself from what's going on a day to day. And I think just seeing that helped me do that for myself, right? It helped me realize like, okay, you know what? I'm not Mr. Ummahfy. Like I love Ummahfy, but I can't. I'm more than Ummahfy, right? I remember Farzah saying he's like, you know, I'm a son. Like I'm a good cook. Like I can do other things. Like I'm not just what I put out onto the world. And I think that's something that I'm constantly battling with, but I think I've gotten a lot better.
Well, that's amazing. My manager once gave me this advice that if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to know when you'll wake up, when you're going to work out, when you're going to eat. Like, you need to have clarity over a lot of these basic things. Because if you lack discipline in your life, how are you going to lead others? What's your take on it? And, the reason I brought this question up was because th- the last time we met, I saw you having everything on your calendar. So I know you have everything scheduled and have a certain discipline. But yeah, so like, what's your take on it? And does it get hard sometimes to just follow the clock, do everything, get done with your to do list every day? Do you lose motivation?
I'm a very free spirit kind of person, so it's very difficult for me to have a super
Yeah.
regimented routine. But I remember when I was telling one of my early advisors that I wanted to build a company, he said, this was at the time, he's like, Safi, you're 21. Figure out how to live. Figure out how to be a human being that is their own person. You know, they're a 20-year-old. You're not a child anymore. You're done with college. You're not, you don't have training wheels anymore. Figure out what it means to be a person, what matters to you, right? What's important. And just like getting into routine, getting into flow. And I kind of didn't take that advice because I ended up being a founder anyway. But I did take that advice in the sense where I did do some introspection with regards to that. And I thought about, building this routine. And I think absolutely one of the biggest unlocks as a founder is dialing in every other part of your life, right? Making sure you're eating super clean, which is something I pride myself on. Making sure you're consistent in the gym, which is something I try my best to do. At the bare minimum, if I'm not working out in the gym, like even today, I'll just do pull ups, push ups, dips before I leave the house, like a couple sets of 10, just so I, have gotten in some physical activity for the day. And at the end of the day, it doesn't take a lot of sets to actually make progress. But gym bro stuff aside, eating, sleeping, drinking enough water, working out, like the basic fundamentals of being a human being are actually the prerequisites to being an entrepreneur. Like, in my opinion, don't expect to be a successful entrepreneur if you can't dial in those basic things. I'm sure obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but those are in small sprints, right? I think small periods of intensity are okay where you're not doing those things because you have a deadline or you're grinding for something. For example, I'd say the biggest struggle with regards to my routine is the amount of travel within my schedule. I'll be in an incredible flow doing everything, and then I'll go to New York for 2 weeks and I'm like sleeping on couches and I'm moving between places and I'm hosting events all day and attending things from like sunrise to sunset. And I come back to Chicago and my routine is just shot. And that sucks. But that's where the discipline comes in, right? Because once you have a routine, it's easy to keep it. The hard part is getting reset back to zero and then putting up that physical effort again to reconstruct that from scratch.
No, I completely agree. And, I see a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and they're constantly working, they're on their laptops, which is great. It shows how passionate they are. But then in the long run, it can be really detrimental to your health, especially if you don't take the time to work out, if you're not eating right. So then, how are you going to sustain and maintain that consistency? That's going to be impossible. So, love that. Um, I personally believe that every aspiring entrepreneur should master critical thinking and problem solving, right? Because at the end of the day, building a business or a brand, it's just about solving one issue after another. And it's these skills are not always taught directly in schools as much as I feel they should be. They're not. I would love to hear your thoughts on how did you develop your problem solving and critical thinking skills.
I think studying computer science gives you a strong fundamentals for problem solving because at the end of the day, I'm not the CTO of my company. I'm technical, but I am not coding day in and day out. So I think the biggest thing I took from like engineering school was being able to solve problems, was being able to pick up things quickly, right? You know, learning C at Purdue and then having to pick up, JavaScript or TypeScript or these different things, right? It's like activating a part of your brain. And, but at the end of the day, like no matter how much coding languages you learn or like doing chess puzzles or any other like gimmicky things to learn problem solving and decision making, nothing actually teaches you how to do that besides doing it. And that's why I took the plunge and became a founder so young, when most of the advice from my parents, but even from like established career experts, like that one mentor of mine who's a very successful entrepreneur, he was like, work a job, get some experience, learn how to do things a little bit, and then go and build a company. But the reason why I didn't do that is because the only way to learn how to be a founder, in my opinion, is to be a founder. And there are skills you can pick up in other jobs, but the breadth that you get, like doing everything under the sun as a founder, is only gained by being that. And a large portion of that is that problem solving and decision making that you learn on the job. So really, I don't know, build things and build hard things. Like that's how you're going to actually grow.
No, I love that. And I think an advantage of starting early also means that you are able to learn fast and also fail and then just move on, and you have more time, right? Because as life moves on, you have family, you have other responsibilities, but if you're starting early, you have more time and also you have more courage. I think so. I'll share a story. Right, I created a music video 2 years back, and it was tough, like traveling all the way to India, working out the logistics, working in an industry that I had no idea about. Now that I think about that experience, I'm like, how did I do it? And I think I was able to do it because 2 years back, I was even more courageous. I was even more create I won't say creative, but I had more courage to experiment, and I did not really care about the outcome as much as I do right now. So I think starting early does have its own benefits. Great. So if we boil entrepreneurship down to the essentials, right, there are a lot of skills people talk about: marketing, leadership, sales, tech. Um, but I would love to know from you, like, if you had to pick one skill that every entrepreneur should master above everything else, what would that be?
Yeah. I think as a founder, you have to have a very sharp tongue. So it's around being able to speak confidently, convince people, whether it's investors or people that you want to work for you, to come and join your company, or it's marketing, making content, like all of these things. You have to be very charismatic. You have to be very good at speaking to people. At the end of the day, you can outsource technology, you can outsource design, you can outsource sales, though I wouldn't recommend it fully in the beginning. But even if you don't study sales, if you're highly charismatic and you're highly adept at speaking to people, then you'll be able to get away with 90% of that skills. And there's an app called Gleam, which is like Duolingo for these sort of soft skills like charisma and getting better at speaking to people. And that's something I would recommend for people who are trying to improve that skill.
No, that's awesome. Would love to check that out. Uh, so you built Ummahfy with a co-founder, which is amazing. The more people are involved, the more ideas you get. But it's also really tough working with another person, especially if they have the same power as you. How do you actually pick the right people to work with, especially if it's a co-founder?
No, a co-founder is absolutely like make or break person within your company. I think one of the most common reasons startup fails is because of co-founder conflict. So I think it's important that you've worked with the person before. For me, in my example, my co-founder has been my best friend since elementary school. We built the paper products company before, and not that that's like as relevant experience, but we've been building projects together our whole lives. You know, we did our first hackathon together, we learned computer science together. So there's a lot of shared background, and that comes with its own challenges. Don't get me wrong, you know, there's a lot of things that like guy friends will not say because, you know, we've been friends so long, there's sort of lapse in communication sometimes versus if you're starting more of a fresh relationship with the co-founder, it's easy to set new boundaries rather than change old boundaries from 20 years, right? But for people who are looking to find a co-founder, I would say make sure that it's a very complementary skill set to yours. I wouldn't recommend having, you know, if you have the same exact skill set as your co-founder, you're going to be butting heads. So, you know, if one of you is technical and one of you is running more sales, marketing, operations, which is sort of the deal at Ummahfy, that's a great way to approach that. Or even if you're both technical, say one is like back end, one is front end, that's another great way to go about that. So just making sure that you've worked together before, you guys have the same goals and outlook on life as well. Some people just aren't founder material, and they might like the idea of being a founder and might like the concept of being a founder, but when it actually comes to it and when you're grinding all night and you're pulling all-nighters for product launches, like that takes a very specific kind of person, and usually those are the kind of people that don't fit in within like the regular 9 to 5, so they stick out. So I'd say, yeah, choose your co-founder very carefully, and you'll be successful.
No, I love that. And I love how you mentioned that a lot of people want to get into this, they want to be founders, but they just don't have the discipline or they just cannot grind because it's not for the faint heart, right? You need a lot of courage, you need to work really really hard. Now I'm not taking away from people who do 9 to 5. I did 9 to 5 and that's also a lot of work. But I think when you're in this space, when you're building a business, you don't know when your next paycheck will come, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So it's really important to keep all of that in mind. You mentioned that there's certain traits that you should look for in your co-founder. What would those be?
That's a great question. I think understanding how determined they are and their why, right? Why do they want to build a company with you? Is it for clout? Is it for money? Is it because they actually want to build the thing or they just have love for building? Those are all very different. And I would strongly advise against people who are in it for the vanity metrics, right? For the clout, for the money, because statistically those people are less likely to actually succeed and see through it versus the people who actually love the journey. And like me and my co-founder, we are those kinds of people. We're like, I love what I'm doing every day, even though I'm working 12-hour days and I'm grinding, you know, from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. I enjoy all of it. So it doesn't bother me. Um, so I'd say understanding their motivation is a really big one, but also just the other like characteristics, right? Are they highly disciplined? Because if you're not disciplined, you're also not going to make it. Are they, you know, do they have a high level of either IQ or EQ? Like I hate to get into sort
Emotional.
of, yeah, EQ, emotional quotient or intelligence quotient. I hate to get into things where it's like, you know, well, IQ is somewhat deterministic, but EQ isn't, and I think that's more important, right? But understanding like, is this person, do they have what it takes to actually see projects through? Do they have a track record of excellence? Those are all very highly important.
No, that's absolutely true. You know, earlier in our conversation, you spoke that how you told your parents that you're never gonna work. I love that. I'm gonna try. Uh, but it's also tough because we're so used to getting paychecks every 15th and 30th. That when you start something of your own and you don't have that money coming to your bank account, it hurts, right? It's different. Um, at any point in your life, you know, did you were you kind of like two ways about it that, oh, maybe I should go and get a job so I can have more money coming in, because being an entrepreneur also comes with a lot of uncertainty.
Absolutely. I mean, I think at the age I'm at right now, I'm willing to take on a lot of risk, but in order to sustain myself throughout building Ummahfy, before I started building, I had been saving up essentially throughout college, working my internships, when I was a new grad, working as well as a product manager. Throughout all that time, I religiously saved 50% plus of my paycheck. Like that's always been my standard, has been 50%. And I didn't really know what I was putting it in. Like a lot of it has been lost in crypto and stocks. Actually, I feel like my stock picks were even worse, but anyway, exposing myself. But a lot of it was just stacking in cash. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense to people. But for me, I also understood that stocks and crypto are for rich people. They're for high earners, right? That's how you stack a nest egg from 20 to 60 years old and then you retire rich. But we're not trying to retire rich. We're trying to get rich and then retire for the rest of our lives. And by retirement, I mean do things that you actually want to do and not worry about what other people have to say about it. So I wasn't worried or thinking too much about those sort of investments. I was thinking, how can I take this money and create 5x, 10x, 100x, 1000x returns? And that was by investing in myself. And, I played around looking into, upskilling, looking into various business models. And I've tried so many things. I started a clothing brand. I tried getting into real estate. I tried getting into, I did social media marketing, and I've done a lot of different business models. And that's actually how I've been able to sustain myself as well, is taking on clients for social media, which is a skill I developed while being a founder. And then I realized, hey, this is a skill that I'm actually quite good at, probably due to like the creative side of my background. So that's sort of how I've been able to sustain myself while bootstrapping Ummahfy from the ground up without actually having to work a consistent 9 to 5 and clock in, day out. I've been able to just generate enough money for me to have my own personal runway and even invest a little bit into Ummahfy while working just a couple hours a week.
That's amazing. So I get my lesson: save. Do not carelessly spend money because you don't know when the next gig will come. That's a great advice, and I think a lot of people, including myself, should follow this. Um, Also, honestly, I believe that a lot of startups fail because they try to do too much at the same time. They're chasing like 10 different ideas. They're catering to like 10 groups of audience, right? But if you look at the most successful companies, be it Amazon, be it Facebook, Instagram, or even a lot of other brands, they all start by doing one thing exceptionally well and then upscaling. What's your take on this, and how important has like this focus been while you were building Ummahfy?
Focus is everything. Not to call out some of our competitors, but I've seen a lot of companies in the Muslim space. I'm sure you've seen it as well, right? The all-in-one Muslim ecosystem, Masjid CRM, Zabiha food ecosystem, Fatwa CRM, everything, right? It's just all in one, like the entire Islam boiled down into one app, right? And a lot of people try to do those things, and they even come to me and they show me and they ask me about it, and I'm like, that's cool, man. Like you've built, and they've built these things, and I'm like, this is great. Like, get, give it a shot. But my opinion is do something really, really well and focus on that one avatar, which is why we're very narrowly focused on mastering Muslim events, right? The way people find Muslim events, the way people make Muslim events, the way people share and distribute and get more people, right? The events ecosystem is what we're focused on. And we're not diluting ourselves by adding halal restaurants, or like we could very easily, let people find masjids through Ummahfy because we're partnered with a bunch of masjids. But that's not what we want to be known for. We want to be known for finding Muslim events, so we focus on that. And for anyone else building another startup, you should be very careful about what you build and what you don't build. Like the what you don't do is more important than what you actually end up doing. So it's worth taking a lot of time to think about the specific avatar and the one specific problem you're solving, not the 50 problems that you might be solving.
No, that's really interesting. And I think when you kind of zoom out and see a successful startup, no matter how small it is in the beginning, uh, it needs to operate like an actual organization, right? You need a really strong team that you're working with. So from your perspective, what are some of the most important functions or departments that early um, entrepreneurs or like every startup needs to think about and focus on?
Absolutely. I'd say the core would be product, which is engineering, design, and then marketing, sales, and like leadership, right? Which is like the C-suite, who operations, who's bringing people in. I'd say those are like the core things. And at the end of the day, as a founding team, I'd say the most adept founding team is really a good marketer, content person, and a good engineer and a good designer, preferably like a design developer. I'd say that's like the dream team right now when it comes to building products. And I've genuinely seen products go from 0 to 6 million plus ARR with a team of 3 or 4 just like that.
So the message I get is you don't need a lot of people. You don't need a team of 50 folks. Even if you have 3 to 4 people who are talented, focused, you should be fine.
Yeah, I mean the $1 billion unicorn is coming. Sam Altman called it, and it's probably going to happen within the next like 3 years.
That's awesome. Um, you also mentioned early on, you said that you guys mostly hire interns, right? Um, but how do you, if you're not compensating them, then how do you make sure that they stay engaged? How do you reward them for their work and effort?
Absolutely, that's a great question. I think the thing about Ummahfy is people want to be a part of like a greater mission, right? And with Ummahfy, we're giving the people who work with us the opportunity to be a part of something greater than themselves. And, when they're working their regular 9 to 5, which can be draining, I'd like to believe that working on Ummahfy actually brings energy back into people, right? Because it's like you're contributing to our society and the well-being of, our community at large. But at the same time, we do try to incentivize the people within our team with potential opportunities to move forward within the organization, if that is possible. And of course, as we become a more revenue generating and profitable organization, we'd like to return that to the founding members as well, but all in good time.
Well, that's awesome. This is the boring part, but legal, compliance, finances, all of it is really important to maintain a startup, to scale a startup. But when you don't have background in those areas, right? Do you use any tools, or do you go to any mentors who can really help you navigate through those complexities?
Yeah. I mean, it's been really amazing. Maybe it's because we're building in the Muslim space, but I think just having the Muslim ecosystem of lawyers and accountants and other people's, they've really been there for us, and they've been able to give us a lot of free advice, recommendations, and work with us and help us out, even getting into the weeds. So having that strong community, especially Noor House, which is the space that I co-founded in downtown Chicago, I think the team there is very strong and has a lot of different areas of expertise. And we also like to bring in experts to speak at Noor House. So I think having those people just to lean on and give us those advice has been invaluable.
Awesome. No, that's great. If you were to give an advice to a new entrepreneur who is just starting out, have no major resources or backing, what would you say to them?
I think it's different for everyone depending on what you want to do, but there's two things you have to do to be successful. You have to do something, and you have to let people know about it. So I would start off by, if you don't know what you want to do, go to a lot of networking events. Go out, put yourself out there as much as possible. If you're the type of person that would be willing to make content, make content. I recommend it for everyone, even if they are introverted, because it just increases your surface area for opportunity. But I mean, if you're introverted, networking events might also be difficult, but it might be a little bit less of a mental barrier than posting content. So go to networking events, put yourself out there, talk to people. By doing that, you'll get ideas. Take one of those ideas, start building something, build anything. Because then when you go to places and you talk to more people, you're not just some guy or girl that's thinking about doing something and talking to people. You're a doer, you're an action taker. And even if you're not married to that idea and fully intention your full intention is to go out and do something else, being a builder of something will attract the other builders to you. So really build something, tell people about it. And the best way you can do that is by meeting people, coming up with ideas, taking that idea, executing it, and then continuing to meet more people and tell more people about it until you're known as someone who has done something, which is what you're doing. And then when the opportunity arises where your perfect skill set and your perfect interests would be leveraged best, then you've built that brand around yourself that you'd be able to actually take on that role and take that position and build the thing that you want to do.
So take action and don't overthink. Well, that's wonderful. Well, it was pleasure having you today with us. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I feel that our audience will find a lot of value. This is a question that I am planning to ask every guest that I interview. What are some of the things that you actually liked about our podcast, and how can we improve further?
He was not part of the script. I mean, this is great. This is my first in-person podcast. I've done virtual ones, and it's wonderful to actually have like a conversation face to face. So that's like the biggest positive. It feels very natural. It feels like we're just having a conversation. And you went off script a little bit, but it was in a natural way where you were just asking follow-up questions and being like a conversationalist. So that was wonderful. And I think just keep doubling down on that. Like even if you move further away from the script and you just make the podcast more and more like a natural conversation. I think those are the podcasts I enjoy listening to best, and probably people will enjoy being a part of best, is where it feels less like a podcast and more just like a couple friends hanging out, for sure. But it was lovely. Thank you so much, Ramsha.
Thank you so much.